My career was on fire. At 28, I was a senior programmer pulling in a six-figure salary. But instead of enjoying my success, I was back in my childhood bedroom, living with my parents. I genuinely believed I was helping them after the recession. But the truth was, they needed my money to maintain a lifestyle they couldn't afford. My sister, Emily, 4 years my senior, was the golden child, the perfect housewife with the perfect husband. James, a 34-year-old software engineer. While Emily and James showcased their seemingly perfect life, I was 3 years into a long-distance relationship with my boyfriend, Michael, who was 2 time zones away. The family dynamic was a constant reminder of my unfulfilled domestic life. My parents celebrated Emily's domestic achievements, while my professional successes were barely acknowledged. I was paying half their mortgage and bills, yet Emily was the one who received all the praise. James was always a little too attentive to me. He'd bring me coffee, ask about my work, and his touches would last a beat too long. Emily never seemed to notice. 2 weeks before everything came crashing down, James started acting differently, showering Emily with gifts and date nights, as if he were trying to prove something. One Tuesday evening, I came home to find my family waiting for me in the living room. My father, holding his phone, showed me a series of explicit text messages. The conversation was between me and James, filled with graphic descriptions and claims of wanting to sleep with him. "What the hell is this?" I said, reaching for the phone. "These aren't real." My mother snapped. "Don't lie to us." James was so upset, so worried about what this would do to Emily. I looked at James, who sat with his arm around a weeping Emily, a picture of wounded betrayal. I pulled out my own phone to show them my actual message history, but no one would look. My father waved it away, saying James showed us everything. The timestamps, the phone numbers, all of it matches up. They accused me of being a disgrace, of trying to steal my sister's husband out of jealousy. I couldn't believe they were kicking me out based on a pack of lies. They gave me 24 hours to leave. My first call was to Michael, who immediately offered to fly out, but I told him to stay. My next call was to my 83-year-old grandfather. Henry, he had always been sharp, and when I told him what happened, he didn't hesitate. "Those don't sound like messages you'd send," he said. "Then you come stay with us tonight if you need to." He arrived the next morning with his old pickup truck to help me move. He didn't say much, but I caught him watching my father with an expression of cold disappointment. The spare room at my grandparents' house was small but comfortable. That evening, I told Grandpa Henry everything about James's strange behavior. He listened intently, then said, "Your grandmother and I are going to do some research. James might not be as perfect as everyone thinks." A week later, my boss called me. My father had been calling my company, claiming I was going through a mental health crisis and that my inappropriate behavior might affect my work performance. He was trying to sabotage my career. The fact that he would stoop to this level made it clear that this wasn't just about fake texts. It was about my father being so committed to his lie that he would destroy my life to avoid admitting he was wrong. Grandpa Henry must have seen the realization on my face because he nodded knowingly. "Your father always did double down when he was caught in a mistake," he said, "but he's made a bigger error in judgment this time than he realizes." 3 weeks later, Grandpa had a massive heart attack and was gone before I could get to the hospital. My parents were on vacation and didn't change their plans for the funeral. Emily sent a generic flower arrangement. I was left to plan the funeral alone. While going through his desk, I found a manila folder labeled James Morrison, Research. Inside were bank records, credit reports, and printed emails between James and my father about business opportunities that sounded like money laundering schemes. At the bottom was a note from Grandpa. "Sarah, if something happens to me before this is resolved, take this to Bob Patterson. Your father and James are not the men they pretend to be." A week after the funeral, Bob Patterson, Grandpa's lawyer, informed me that Grandpa had left everything to me. The house, savings, investments, all of it. He had changed the will 6 months ago, stating that my father had demonstrated a concerning lack of judgment and moral character. Bob handed me a sealed letter from Grandpa. He'd suspected James for years, and my being framed had confirmed his suspicions. His investigation had uncovered a network of financial crimes, including money laundering and tax evasion, totaling over $50 million. The fake texts were James's attempt to neutralize me as a threat. Just as the letter predicted, my father called 2 days later. His tone was warm and conciliatory. "Sarah, sweetheart, we need to talk," he said. He wanted to forgive me and put the whole mess behind us, but only because he needed access to the inheritance. "That's interesting timing," I said. "This sudden desire for reconciliation. It wouldn't have anything to do with Grandpa's will, would it?" His voice grew cold. "Your grandfather left you a substantial inheritance. It would be appropriate for you to share that with your family." I refused. and his true colors showed. "You selfish little bitch," he snarled, hanging up. He escalated his attacks, calling my company's clients and claiming I was having a mental health crisis. That's when I took Grandpa's evidence to the FBI. The agent I spoke with was initially skeptical, but when he saw the documents, his attitude changed. "If your grandfather's research is accurate," he said, "we're looking at multiple federal crimes involving millions of dollars." Months later, Emily called me. She had discovered that James had been having multiple affairs and had hidden significant debts. She had also found bank accounts and credit cards in her name that she never applied for. A week later, she moved in with me and Grandma. "I should have listened to you," she said one evening. "I was so invested in my perfect marriage that I couldn't see what was right in front of me." The FBI's investigation revealed that James and my father had been running a sophisticated money laundering scheme for over 5 years. James had kept detailed records as insurance against my father. The arrests were coordinated and simultaneous. My father got 15 years in federal prison. James got 12, and my mother, an accessory, got 8 to 10 years. All their assets were seized. Emily used her portion of the inheritance to start a successful consulting firm and began seeing a therapist. Michael relocated from Portland, and we bought a house together near Grandma, who started a support group for families affected by financial crimes. My company promoted me to Director of Security Operations after the FBI investigation. It's ironic that being framed led to an opportunity I never would have imagined. Sometimes Emily asks if I feel bad for our parents, but I remember my grandfather's letter. I remember my father calling me a disgrace. I remember being alone at the funeral. They chose greed over family, lies over truth. Now they're spending the next decade thinking about those choices in federal prison. And I think that's exactly what they deserve. The finality of the court's verdict was a strange kind of liberation. For so long, my life had been tangled up in the lies of my family, their schemes and their betrayal. Now, with the slam of a gavel and the pronouncement of sentences, that chapter was definitively closed. It was a bizarre blend of grief and relief. I had lost my family, but I had reclaimed my life. In the months that followed, Emily and I navigated a new, fragile reality. Living together in Grandpa's house with Grandma Margaret was a constant, gentle reminder of the man who had saved us. The atmosphere was no longer defined by the quiet resentment and emotional manipulation I had grown used to. Instead, it was filled with the clinking of teacups, the soft rustle of Grandma's gardening books, and the slow, deliberate work of two sisters rebuilding a bond that had been shattered. Emily's journey was harder than mine in many ways. She had to dismantle her entire identity. The perfect grades, the perfect marriage, the perfect life, all of it had been a carefully constructed facade. She began seeing a therapist, working through the years of emotional abuse and manipulation she hadn't even recognized. Her newfound freedom was terrifying at first. She was a woman in her mid-30s who had never truly lived for herself. I watched her struggle, and my anger at her past choices slowly transformed into a deep, protective empathy. One evening, we were sitting in the kitchen, and she looked at me with tears in her eyes. "I think I was so desperate to be what they wanted me to be," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "The perfect daughter, the perfect wife. I thought if I was perfect enough, they'd love me unconditionally. But their love was always conditional, wasn't it?" Her words hit me hard. I had always seen myself as the one who didn't fit, the one who was never quite good enough. But in that moment, I realized we were both victims of the same dynamic. We had both been trying to earn our parents' love, just in different ways. I had tried to buy it with my financial contributions, and she had tried to win it with her perfection. Emily decided to use her portion of the inheritance, which I'd insisted on splitting with her and Grandma, over their protest to start a new life. She launched a consulting firm for small businesses, a venture she'd always dreamed of, but had never pursued, convinced it was too unladylike for a proper wife. Watching her thrive, watching her confidence grow with each new client, was one of the most fulfilling parts of my own new beginning. Michael finally moved to Chicago, and we bought a house together, a few blocks from my grandparents' place. It was the first time in our relationship that we were truly in the same place at the same time. The transition from long distance to living together was surprisingly smooth. We fell into a comfortable rhythm of shared meals, late-night talks, and quiet weekends spent building a life that was entirely our own, free from the shadow of my family's drama. Meanwhile, my career took an unexpected turn. The FBI's investigation into my father and James's criminal enterprise had given me a unique perspective on corporate security and digital fraud. My boss, who had been impressed with how I'd handled the harassment campaign against me, offered me a promotion to Director of Security Operations. The irony wasn't lost on me. Being framed for a crime I didn't commit had led me to a career opportunity I never could have imagined. I was now in a position to prevent the very kind of deception that had torn my life apart. The old world faded away. My parents and James's trials were no longer front-page news. Their friends and associates, who had so eagerly celebrated their success, quickly disavowed them when the truth came out. The country club memberships, the social status, the carefully curated image of a successful, upstanding family, all of it was gone, replaced by the cold reality of prison uniforms and visiting hours. Sometimes I would get letters from my mother. They were a mix of self-pity and thinly veiled manipulation. She never apologized for what she had done. Instead, she spoke of her loneliness and how unfair it was that she was being punished for her husband's mistakes. I never wrote back. There was nothing left to say. The last time I saw my father was at his sentencing. He looked smaller, his face pale and his shoulders slumped. When he saw me in the courtroom, his expression was a complicated mix of anger and defeat. He had lost everything his business, his reputation, his family, not because of me, but because of his own greed and pride. I felt no satisfaction, only a quiet, resolute calm. In a way, I had gotten a second chance at a life I never knew I wanted. I had a loving partner, a sister who was becoming my best friend, and a grandmother, who was a constant source of wisdom and strength. I had a job that was challenging and meaningful, and I had the financial freedom to build a life on my own terms. Thanks to the inheritance from the one person who had believed in me, without a doubt. The scars of my family's betrayal were still there, of course. I learned to trust my instincts, to be cautious of people who seemed too good to be true, and to recognize the subtle signs of manipulation. But those scars weren't a source of pain anymore. They were a testament to my resilience, a reminder that I had survived something terrible and emerged stronger on the other side. I had been forced to leave my family, but in doing so, I had found a new one, a family built not on blood or obligation, but on honesty, trust, and unconditional love. And that, I realized, was a priceless inheritance.